A millionaire handed $1 to a girl who was selling candy. "You look just like my dad," she said. He turned, frozen in place. Before we get into the story, please drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The crisp autumn breeze swept through the financial district of Manhattan, scattering leaves across the sidewalks. Jonathan Reed stepped out of the shining glass tower of Reed Investments, adjusting his tailored Armani tie as the doorman gave him a respectful nod. At 42, Jonathan had everything that money could buy: a penthouse with a view of Central Park, a collection of classic cars, and a reputation as Wall Street's most powerful investor. Yet, despite all of it, something was missing. It lingered in the quiet hours and in the empty spaces of his life. Nothing in his acquisitions could fill the void. "The Norton merger is complete, sir," his assistant said, rushing to catch up with him, holding a leather portfolio. "The board is pleased. Early projections show a 30% return." Jonathan gave a slight nod. "Another deal, another billion," he murmured. The excitement of the numbers long since faded. "Your car is waiting," the assistant said, motioning to the sleek black Mercedes parked at the curb. That's when he saw her, a small figure by a makeshift cardboard table on the sidewalk. Her auburn hair shimmered in the afternoon sunlight. A little girl, no older than 6, was carefully arranging homemade candies. Something about her stopped Jonathan in his tracks. "I'll walk," he said, dismissing his assistant with a casual wave as he made his way toward the girl. The moment she looked up, Jonathan saw something in her hazel eyes speckled with gold that felt oddly familiar. "Hello, mister," she greeted, her voice soft but clear. "Would you like to buy a cookie? They're really good and just $1, the girl asked. Jonathan studied the weathered table with its hand-lettered sign. "Homemade cookies help my grandma get better." "What's your name?" he asked, kneeling down to her level despite his expensive suit. "Lily Anderson," she replied, standing up proudly. "My grandma taught me how to bake, but she's sick now, so I'm helping." "That's very brave," Jonathan said, feeling an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. "I'll take them all." Lily's eyes widened. "All of them? Really?" As Jonathan handed her several crisp bills, Lily fumbled with the pocket of her apron. A small photograph slipped out and landed face up on the sidewalk between them. Jonathan reached for it instinctively, but then froze. The face staring back was his own, much younger, laughing, his arm around a beautiful woman he hadn't allowed himself to remember for nearly a decade. "That's my daddy," Lily said simply, taking the photo back. "I never met him, but Mommy said he was special. Before she went to heaven, she told me he'd come help us someday." She tucked the picture carefully away. "Grandma doesn't know. I carry it." Jonathan couldn't speak, couldn't move. The world shrank to this small girl with his eyes, his mother's auburn hair. A single tear slipped down Jonathan's cheek as the realization crashed over him like a wave. This was his daughter. Later that evening, Jonathan sat in his penthouse, his mind racing with long-suppressed memories. The city lights glittered beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows, but all he could see were the shadows from 10 years ago. Caroline Anderson. Even the thought of her name brought a tightness to his chest. They had met at a university fundraiser. Jonathan, a rising financial star. Caroline, a passionate English literature professor with dreams of writing children's books. Her laughter had cut through the pretentious chatter of the event, drawing him in like gravity. "When you explain investments," she had said, "so you're in the business of future possibilities." For 6 months, they created their own world. Weekend, trips to coastal towns, long discussions about books, disastrous cooking experiments in his bachelor apartment. Caroline had awakened something in him, a longing for simplicity, for a connection beyond transactions. Then came the London opportunity, a chance to establish European operations, to triple his wealth in just a few years. "Take it," his uncle Harrison had insisted during their weekly dinner. "You can't waste your talent on distractions." Harrison had raised Jonathan after his parents' death, instilling ambition as religion. He was Jonathan's mentor, his only family. "Caroline is special," Jonathan had confessed. Harrison's face had hardened. Your father was special too. That's why he died broke, leaving you nothing but dead dreams. Jonathan pushed away the memory of his final night with Caroline. He could still see her small apartment, filled with the scent of jasmine tea. "I've been offered a position in Paris," she had said, her voice hopeful. "A visiting professorship. It's not far from London." But Harrison had already arranged everything: exclusive meetings, society introductions, even a strategic dating plan with the daughter of a shipping magnate. "I need to focus on my career," Jonathan had told Caroline. "This requires my complete attention." The hurt in her eyes still haunted him. "So this was just temporary for you?" she had asked before he left the next morning. No proper goodbye, just a coward's note and flowers. 3 unanswered calls from her had come in that first week abroad. Then silence. By the time he returned to New York 2 years later, he had convinced himself that it had been the right choice. His success in Europe had solidified his reputation. Harrison had introduced him to Eleanor, who understood his world perfectly. Their engagement had seemed inevitable, until Eleanor ended it, claiming Jonathan could never truly love anyone. Jonathan stared at his phone. The number for Caroline's old university was already dialed. Would they have information about her? About their daughter? The shock of that reality, a child, his child, sent him pacing across his Brazilian hardwood floors. Lily's face, those familiar eyes, the photograph. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Harrison's name flashed on the screen. "Just checking on tomorrow's board meeting," his uncle said when Jonathan answered. "The Singapore investors, I need to reschedule," Jonathan interrupted him. A pause. "Are you ill?" Harrison asked. "No. Something's come up." What could possibly be more important than the Singapore deal? Everything, Jonathan realized. Everything was more important than another deal. "I'll tell you tomorrow," he said, ending the call before Harrison could protest. The night stretched ahead of him, filled with questions only Caroline could have answered. Caroline, who was now gone forever, leaving their daughter to sell cookies on a Manhattan street. Morning light filtered through motorized blinds as Jonathan's alarm chimed precisely at 5:30 a.m. For the first time in years, he was already awake, having barely slept. The face of a little girl with his eyes haunted his thoughts. His usual morning routine felt suddenly meaningless. The precisely timed workout, the custom-blended protein shake, the Bloomberg terminals buzzing with market updates from 3 continents, the penthouse that once represented success now felt cavernous and cold. "Sir, your 8 a.m. with Takahashi is confirmed." His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "And Mr. Harrison called twice already." "Cancel everything except the Singapore call," Jonathan replied, surprising himself. He never canceled meetings. His phone buzzed again. "Harrison," Jonathan muttered, letting it go to voicemail. Instead, he pulled out his laptop and typed, "Caroline Anderson, English professor." The search yielded academic publications, a faculty photo from years ago, and then an obituary from the previous year. His stomach dropped. It was real. Caroline was gone. The obituary mentioned her daughter, Lily, and her mother, Margaret, but little else. No mention of him. Why would there be? Jonathan made another search. Margaret Anderson, New York. Among several results, a medical fundraising page caught his eye. "Help Grandma Margaret beat cancer," with a small photo of Lily and an elderly woman with Caroline's smile. The campaign had raised barely $2,000 of its $150,000 goal. His intercom buzzed again. "Sir, Mr. Harrison is in the lobby insisting on seeing you." Jonathan sighed. "Send him up." Minutes later, Harrison Reed strode in, immaculate in his tailored suit despite being in his 70s. The man who had raised him, guided his career, and been his only family since age 12. "What's this about canceling meetings?" Harrison demanded without preamble. "The Singaporean investors specifically requested you." "I met someone yesterday," Jonathan said slowly. "A little girl selling cookies on Fifth Avenue." Harrison's expression remained impassive. "And this relates to business? How exactly?" "She had a photograph, Harrison," Jonathan replied. A picture of me with Caroline Anderson. A flicker of recognition, then concern, crossed Harrison's face before disappearing. The professor from years ago. What of it? The girl is mine. My daughter. Harrison settled into a chair, his face unreadable. You can't know that. She has my eyes, my mother's hair. So do thousands of people in this city. Harrison's voice sharpened. This has scam written all over it. Some woman coaches her daughter to approach a wealthy man. Caroline is dead, Jonathan interrupted, his voice tight. Cancer last year. A pause. Then Harrison, quieter. I'm sorry to hear that, but this doesn't change the facts. You need proof before upending your life over a photograph. Jonathan stared out at the Manhattan skyline, the buildings he partially owned, the streets, named after past Reeds. I'm going to find out. Harrison stood, straightening his jacket. Of course. You should investigate, discreetly. I'll have our security team. No, Jonathan cut him off firmly. This is personal. After Harrison left, promising to reschedule the meetings himself, Jonathan found the address from the fundraising page. A modest apartment in Brooklyn, worlds away from his Manhattan empire. He changed from his business suit into casual clothes, something he rarely wore, and headed for the elevator. For the first time in a decade, the markets would have to wait. Something infinitely more valuable had appeared in his life. Jonathan stood before a weathered brownstone in Brooklyn, worlds away from his glass and steel Manhattan life. The building had character, crumbling in places, resilient in others, much like the lives within it. He checked the address again, heart pounding. Apartment 3B, Margaret and Lily Anderson. His finger hovered over the buzzer. What would he say? Hello, I might be your granddaughter's father. It seemed impossible, yet here he was. A small voice called from behind. Mr. Cookie Man. Jonathan turned to find Lily skipping up the steps, a backpack nearly as big as she was bouncing against. Her. A tired-looking elderly woman followed slowly, leaning on a cane. You're the man who bought all my cookies, Lily explained to her grandmother. He gave me $50. Margaret Anderson's eyes narrowed with immediate suspicion. That's very generous, she said, carefully studying him. Lily, wait inside while I speak to this gentleman. Lily hesitated, then shrugged. Okay, but he's nice, Grandma. She disappeared through the building's door. Margaret's gaze never left Jonathan's face. Who are you, really? What do you want with my granddaughter? The directness reminded him painfully of Caroline. My name is Jonathan Reed. I knew Caroline. Years ago? Recognition dawned in Margaret's eyes, followed by something harder. Reed. Of course, I should have seen it immediately. She studied his face. You have the same eyes. I didn't know, Jonathan said, the words tumbling out. About Lily. I swear I didn't know. Caroline tried to tell you, Margaret said. Flatly. Called your office repeatedly, wrote letters, even went to your building once, 7 months pregnant. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. I never received any messages. I was in London. He stopped, realizing how hollow it sounded. Margaret sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 70-plus years. It doesn't matter now, does it? Caroline's gone, but Lily remains. She gestured toward the door. You might as well come up. The apartment was small but meticulously kept. Books lined every available wall space. Caroline's influence evident. Photographs chronicled a life Jonathan had missed entirely. Caroline holding newborn Lily, first steps, preschool graduations. Are you rich? Lily asked bluntly, sitting cross-legged on a worn couch. You gave me lots of money, Lily added. Lily. Margaret admonished gently. It's okay, Jonathan said, smiling despite the lump in his throat. Yes, I am. I work with investments and help money grow. Could you help Grandma's money grow? She needs medicine that costs lots. Margaret's face flushed. Lily, that's enough. Mr. Reed isn't here about money. But Jonathan saw the prescription. Bottles on the counter. The past due medical bills partially hidden beneath a book. Actually, he said carefully, I'd like to help if you'll let me. Margaret's expression hardened. We don't need charity, especially not charity. Jonathan interrupted her. Responsibility. If Lily is my daughter... He met Margaret's eyes, his voice dropping. Is she? Margaret looked at him for a long moment before her shoulders slumped slightly. Caroline never named you on the birth certificate, but she never spoke of anyone else either. She glanced at Lily, now showing Jonathan her favorite book. Look at them side by side and tell me what you think. The resemblance was undeniable. This was his child, his daughter, and he had a lifetime of absence to make up for. Jonathan sat in his car outside Margaret's apartment, his mind racing. The afternoon with Lily had been both wonderful and painful. Watching her show him her drawings, listening to her stories about school, seeing Caroline's gentle nature in every gesture. He'd left with a promise to visit again, careful not to reveal their potential connection. Yet Margaret had agreed it was best to proceed cautiously for Lily's sake. Your driver could use a break, a familiar voice said, startling him. Harrison slid into the passenger seat, his expression unreadable. I had you followed standard procedure when a billionaire suddenly cancels meetings and disappears, Harrison said. Jonathan tensed. That's intrusive even for you. It's protective, Harrison corrected. Especially when I discover you're visiting a child claiming to be your heir. She's not claiming anything. She doesn't even know who I am. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Then what exactly are you doing here? Confirming the truth, Jonathan replied, starting the car. I'm having a DNA test done discreetly. Smart, Harrison nodded. And when it shows no relation, it will. She has my mother's hair, my eyes. Coincidences or carefully cultivated similarities? Harrison cut in. You've worked too hard to fall for such an obvious scheme. Conveniently deceased mother, a sick grandmother, a charming child. It's textbook. Jonathan drove in silence for several minutes. The grandmother refused my help. Of course she did, Harrison said. Initial refusal increases the eventual payout. You're being cynical. I'm being practical, Harrison countered. I've protected the Reed fortune for 2 generations. Let's establish facts before emotions. 3 days later, Jonathan received the DNA results in his private office. 99.99998% probability of paternity. He stared at the report, relief and terror battling within him. He was a father, had been for 6 years without knowing. His intercom buzzed. Sir, I found what you requested, his assistant said. The mail and phone logs from 10 years ago. The records revealed a pattern. 7 calls from Caroline, marked as handled with no messages forwarded. 3 letters with her return address logged as received but never delivered to him. Who handled these? Jonathan asked, his voice tight. All correspondence during your London assignment was managed by Mr. Harrison's office, as per standard. Protocol? The betrayal hit him like a physical blow. Had Harrison deliberately kept Caroline from reaching him? Known about his child and concealed it? His phone rang. Margaret Anderson. Mr. Reed. Her voice sounded strained. The hospital called. My insurance denied the specialized treatment again. I'll handle it, Jonathan promised, already sending a text to his medical connections. There's something else, Margaret continued. Someone came asking questions about us. A private investigator claiming to conduct a standard background check for a potential benefactor. Jonathan's grip tightened on his phone. What did he ask about Caroline, Lily? Whether we'd been in contact with you before yesterday. Only one person would have arranged this, Jonathan said quietly. The same person who intercepted Caroline's attempts to reach me years ago. Thank you for telling me, Jonathan said, his voice calm. I'll take care of everything. And Margaret, I got the test results. A long silence followed. I never doubted it, she finally said. You have the same determination in your eyes. Caroline said it was your best and worst quality. As he ended the call, Jonathan stared at the photograph of himself and Harrison on his desk. Mentor. Uncle. The man who raised him. The man who may have kept him from his daughter. Autumn sunlight streamed through the windows of a small Brooklyn park. As Jonathan sat on a bench, watching Lily pump her legs on the swings. This was their third meeting since he'd confirmed her paternity, each carefully arranged with Margaret's cautious permission. "Hi, Mr. Reed," Lily called, her auburn hair flying behind her like a banner. Jonathan smiled, still adjusting to the joy her simple presence brought him. He'd spent a lifetime chasing wealth, yet nothing compared to the richness of his daughter's laughter. "Not too high," Margaret cautioned from her bench nearby. Though her health had improved since Jonathan quietly arranged specialized treatment, she still tired easily. He approached the swing, giving gentle pushes. "Do you like school, Lily?" he asked. "Sometimes. I like art and reading. Math is hard. I could help with that," he offered carefully. "I'm pretty good with numbers." Lily looked back at him. "You could be my homework helper." She thought for a moment. "Why didn't I know you before? Were you friends with Mommy?" Jonathan's heart stuttered. "Yes," he said softly. "A long time ago. Before I was born." "Yes." Lily nodded as if this explained everything. "Mommy had lots of friends. She used to tell me stories about them." Jonathan wondered what Caroline had told their daughter about him, if anything beyond that photograph. Later, while Lily fed ducks at the pond, Margaret joined him on the bench. "She's asking questions," he said quietly. Margaret nodded. "She always does. She's like Caroline that way. Curious about everything." "What did Caroline tell her about her father?" Margaret arranged her scarf against the breeze. "That he was kind and smart, that he lived far away. That's all. Nothing about abandonment. About my not knowing." "Caroline wasn't vindictive, Mr. Reed," Margaret continued. "She believed you made your choice, and she respected it." The words stung all the more because they reflected what he'd believed was true, that he'd chosen his career over Caroline, never knowing about the child they'd created. "I've brought something," Jonathan said, pulling a small package from his coat. "If you think it's appropriate." Inside was a children's book about stars and astronomy. "I noticed she's fascinated by the night sky," Jonathan explained. "And there's a small telescope. Nothing extravagant." Margaret examined the gift. "It's thoughtful. Thank you for respecting our boundaries." As they watched Lily, Jonathan gathered his courage. "The treatment is working?" "Yes. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." Margaret gave him a knowing look. "Though they seem mysteriously unconcerned about insurance coverage now." "I'm glad to hear it, Mr. Reed," Margaret said carefully. "What exactly are your intentions regarding Lily?" The directness of the question deserved equal honesty. "I want to be part of her life. How that looks, I'm still figuring out. And if it becomes inconvenient, if your work, nothing is more important," Jonathan interrupted, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Nothing." Margaret studied him, perhaps searching for Caroline's perception of him. The ambitious man who'd chosen his career over love. "Grandma, look," Lily called, running toward them with a fallen maple leaf the size of her hand. "It's perfect." And, as his daughter placed the vibrant leaf in his palm like a precious gift, Jonathan understood what true perfection was. The crisp December air painted Jonathan's breath white as he waited outside Lily's elementary school. After nearly 2 months of cautious visits, their relationship had evolved into something resembling routine. Tuesdays and Thursdays were math help days. Saturdays were for adventures, museums, parks, or today's special trip to the planetarium. The school bell rang, and children poured through the doors like confetti thrown to the wind. Lily spotted him immediately, her face lighting up as she raced down the steps. "Mr. Reed, I got an A on my math test." She thrust a paper toward him, her pride palpable. Jonathan examined the test with exaggerated seriousness. "Outstanding work, Professor Anderson. Your understanding of multiplication is clearly superior." Lily giggled at their private joke. He'd taken to calling her Professor after learning about Caroline's academic career. "Can we still go see the stars?" she asked, slipping her small hand naturally into his as they walked toward his car. "Absolutely. The planetarium awaits." He helped her buckle in, still marveling at how quickly she'd accepted his presence in her life. At the planetarium, Lily's wonder at the cosmic display reminded Jonathan of what he'd forgotten in his relentless pursuit of wealth, the simple joy of discovery. Her questions were endless, her mind absorbing each fact like a sponge. Stars are born and they die, just like people, she observed, her face serious beneath the projected universe. They do, Jonathan agreed, but while they exist, they shine brilliantly. Like Mommy, Lily whispered, leaning against his arm. The simple statement caught Jonathan off guard. Yes, he managed, his throat tight. Exactly like your mom. After the planetarium, they stopped for hot chocolate at a small cafe. Lily stirred extra marshmallows into her cup with scientific precision. Mr. Reed, why don't you have any kids? She asked suddenly. Jonathan nearly choked on his drink. Well, I've been very busy with work. Too busy for a family? The innocent question struck at his core. I thought I was, he admitted. I was wrong. Lily nodded as if this made perfect sense. Grandma says work is important, but people are important too. Your grandmother is very wise, Jonathan said with a small smile. Later, as he dropped Lily home, Margaret invited him in for the first time, without Lily's prompting. She talks about you constantly, Margaret said as they watched Lily arrange her new constellation. Chart on her bedroom wall. The planetarium, the math help, everything. She's extraordinary. Jonathan smiled. Caroline did an amazing job. Yes, she did, Margaret hesitated. I've been thinking, Christmas is coming. If you'd like to join us for dinner, I'd be honored, Jonathan said quickly before she could reconsider. As he prepared to leave, Lily suddenly ran to him with a crayon drawing. Stick figures holding hands beneath a starry sky. It's us, she explained, pointing. You, me, Grandma, and Mommy as a star watching over us. Jonathan stared at the simple drawing, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Do you like it? Lily asked, uncertain. He knelt to her level. It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me. Driving home, Jonathan kept glancing at the drawing on his passenger seat. For the first time in his adult life, he was learning what truly mattered. Not through boardroom victories or market conquests, but through the wisdom of a 6-year-old girl who somehow saw the universe with greater clarity than he ever had. A soft knock at his office door interrupted Jonathan's thoughts. It was late, nearly 2 p.m. The Reed Investments building had emptied hours ago. Come in, he called, expecting his assistant with the Singapore reports. Instead, Margaret Anderson stood in the doorway, looking out of place against the sleek corporate backdrop. She carried a weathered shoebox. Margaret? Jonathan rose quickly. Is everything all right? Lily's fine, Margaret assured him with a nervous smile. I needed to see you alone. Jonathan gestured to the sitting area away from his imposing desk. In the 3 months since he discovered Lily, he and Margaret had developed a cautious respect, their shared love for the child, bridging their differences. The treatment is working well, Margaret said, settling carefully onto the leather sofa. The doctors are quite optimistic. I'm glad to hear it. Margaret placed the shoebox between them. Christmas is next week. Lily's excited about your visit. Jonathan smiled. I've been thinking about gifts. Nothing extravagant, he added quickly. I remember your rules. That's partly why I'm here. Margaret's hands rested protectively on the box. Before you become more involved in her life, there are things you should know. Things Caroline would want you to understand. She opened the box, revealing dozens of envelopes, all addressed to Jonathan Reed at various addresses, his New York office, his London office, even his old apartment. She wrote to you for years, Margaret said, selecting one envelope. This was the first, when she discovered she was pregnant. Jonathan took it with trembling hands. The postmark was dated 7 months after he'd left for London. Inside was Caroline's handwriting, elegant, thoughtful, painfully familiar. Jonathan, I've written this letter a dozen times in my mind. There's no easy way to say this. I'm pregnant. Our child, yes, ours, will arrive in February. I know we ended things and you've made your choice. I respect that. I'm not writing to disrupt your life or make demands. I simply believe you have the right to know. If you want no part of this child's life, I understand. I'm prepared to handle everything. But if some part of you wants a connection with this baby, the door is open. Always. Jonathan read it twice, his vision blurring with unshed tears. I never received this, none of them. I know that now, Margaret said quietly. Caroline didn't. She thought you'd read them and chosen silence. Why bring these now? Margaret selected another envelope. Because of this one. Caroline wrote it in the hospital a week before she died. She asked me to keep it until I was certain of your intentions toward Lily. This letter was written in shakier handwriting. Jonathan, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you've somehow found your way to our daughter. I never told Lily the full truth, that I tried to reach you, that I believed you didn't want us. I simply said her father lived far away. She deserves to form her own opinion of you. I forgive you, Jonathan. Life is too short for bitterness. If you found Lily, if you're reading this, I believe you're ready to be the father she deserves. Love her. That's all I ask. A single tear slipped down Jonathan's cheek. She never knew. I would have come back for them. No, Margaret confirmed. But she hoped someday you might find your way to Lily. And you have. In that moment, surrounded by letters he should have received years ago, Jonathan understood what he needed to do next. Christmas brought a gentle snowfall to New York, transforming the city into a wonderland of white. Jonathan stood at his penthouse window, watching the flakes dance in the wind. In 3 hours, he would join Lily and Margaret for dinner, his first real Christmas in years. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. His interior designer stood waiting, portfolio in hand. Mr. Reed, I've completed the designs as requested, she said, spreading drawings across his dining table. Though I must say, children's rooms are not typically my specialty. Jonathan examined the renderings of what would become Lily's room in his penthouse. He'd given specific instructions: walls the color of the sky at twilight, constellation, patterns on the ceiling that would glow in the dark, and built-in bookshelves for her growing collection. It's perfect, he said. When can construction begin? After the holidays, we'll need 3 weeks, maybe 4. Make it 2, Jonathan replied. Whatever it costs. After she left, he returned to wrapping Lily's gifts: a children's astronomy encyclopedia, a handcrafted wooden music box that played Claire de Lune. Margaret had mentioned it was Caroline's favorite, and a silver bracelet with a tiny star charm. Nothing extravagant as promised. The real gift, the room, would remain a secret until the right moment. His phone rang. Harrison. Jonathan had kept his distance from his uncle since discovering the intercepted letters, unsure how to confront the betrayal without losing control. Harrison's voice carried its usual authority. We need to discuss year-end bonuses before you disappear for the holiday. I've already approved the recommendations without consultation. That's not our protocol, Jonathan said simply. A pause. You've been distracted these past months. The board is noticing the company's performing better than ever. Yes, but your focus is elsewhere. Harrison's tone sharpened. With that child and her grandmother, Jonathan tensed. Her name is Lily, and yes, I'm spending time with my daughter. The word hung between them, the first time Jonathan had openly acknowledged his paternity to Harrison. You can't be certain. DNA doesn't lie. Harrison started to speak, but Jonathan cut him off. Unlike people who intercept personal communications. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Harrison sighed. We should discuss this in person after the holidays, Jonathan replied, ending the call. Later, stepping into Margaret's modest apartment, Jonathan felt a warmth no designer could replicate. Twinkling lights adorned a small tree, delicious aromas filled the air, and Lily, wearing a red velvet dress, launched herself into his arms. You came, just like you promised. Of course I did. He presented his carefully wrapped gifts. Merry Christmas, Professor. Throughout dinner, Jonathan found himself captivated by the simple joy of family conversation. Margaret shared stories of Caroline's childhood Christmases. Lily described her school's holiday pageant in elaborate detail. As they finished dessert, Jonathan gathered his courage. "I have something to ask you both." Margaret and Lily looked at him expectantly. "I've been preparing a room at my home for Lily, for visits. Perhaps weekends sometimes." He turned to Margaret. "With your permission, of course." "A room just for me?" Lily's eyes widened. Margaret studied him thoughtfully. "You're becoming quite attached." "I am," Jonathan admitted. "To both of you." Margaret nodded slowly. "We'll see. Perhaps we could visit first to see this room." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. For Jonathan, who'd spent a lifetime securing definitive victories, this small opening felt like the greatest win of his career. January brought freezing winds to New York, but inside Reed Investments the atmosphere was even colder. Jonathan sat across from Harrison in the executive boardroom, tension crackling between them like static electricity. "You've missed 4 board meetings," Harrison said, tapping a manicured finger against the polished table. "Delegated key client, relationships, and now this restructuring proposal." He gestured to the document between them. "Reducing your operational role by 40%. "I'm not stepping back," Jonathan replied calmly. "I'm reorganizing to focus on strategic decisions while building a stronger executive team, all coincidentally since that child entered your life." "Her name is Lily," Jonathan corrected, his voice hardening. "And yes, being a father requires time." Harrison's face remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed a flash of calculation. "Have you considered what this means for the company, for the Reed legacy?" "I'm enhancing our legacy by creating succession planning." Harrison leaned forward. "I've protected this family's interests for 40 years. When your father died, leaving nothing but debt, I rebuilt everything. When your reckless investments nearly tanked us in 2008, I salvaged our reputation. And when Caroline tried to tell me about my child, you intercepted her messages." Jonathan countered. "Was that protecting family interests too?" Harrison didn't flinch. "You were building our European division. A pregnant ex-girlfriend would have derailed everything. That wasn't your decision to make. It was exactly my decision." Harrison's voice remained calm, reasonable. "You weren't ready for fatherhood then. Your ambition was your defining quality." He paused. "Besides, what life could you have offered them? You were never home, working 18-hour days." The worst part was that Harrison wasn't entirely wrong. The Jonathan of 10 years ago had been consumed by ambition, willing to sacrifice personal connections for professional advancement. "People change," Jonathan said finally. "Do they?" Harrison studied him. "Or do they temporarily divert from their true nature?" "This sentimentality will pass, Jonathan. When it does, your position here might be significantly weakened." After Harrison left, Jonathan sat alone, contemplating his uncle's subtle threat. His phone chimed with a text from Margaret. "Lily's science presentation today. She's hoping you can make it." Across town, Lily waited nervously outside her classroom. Jonathan had promised to come, but the minutes ticked by without his arrival. Her classmates' parents filed in, taking seats for the presentations. "Ready, Lily?" Her teacher asked kindly. "You can go first." Lily glanced at the door once more. "Can I wait just another minute? My Mr. Reed said he'd try to come." As her teacher nodded, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway, slightly breathless. "Sorry I'm late," Jonathan said, slipping into the back row. "Traffic." Lily's face lit up. She proceeded to deliver her presentation on the solar system with newfound confidence, proudly pointing to the model she and Jonathan had built together. Afterward, as they walked to his car, Lily chatted excitedly about her teacher's praise. "You were brilliant, Professor," Jonathan assured her. "A natural scientist." "You really came," Lily said suddenly, her voice softer. "I promised, didn't I?" "Daddy couldn't come to Mommy's important things," Lily said, her eyes on the sidewalk. "That's what Grandma told me once." The casual comment hit Jonathan with the force of revelation. Lily still referred to her unknown father and Mr. Reed as separate people. The time for truth was approaching, but he needed to be certain. Nothing, could threaten their fragile connection, especially not Harrison. For Jonathan Reed, whose life had been defined by boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, nothing could have prepared him for the call that came at 2 a.m. "It's Margaret," the strained voice said when he answered. "I'm at Mount Sinai. The doctors found complications," her voice broke. "I need someone with Lily." Jonathan was already grabbing his keys. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. In the 5 months since he discovered his daughter, he and Margaret had developed an understanding. They were connected now, bound by their love for Lily. This was the first time Margaret had called him for help. When he arrived at their apartment, a neighbor let him in. Lily was sleeping, her face peaceful, unaware of her grandmother's midnight ambulance ride. "Mr. Reed?" Lily's sleepy voice came from the bedroom doorway as he settled on the couch. She clutched her favorite stuffed star, her hair tousled from sleep. "Hey there, Professor," he said gently. "Your grandma had to go to the hospital for some tests. She asked me to stay with you." Lily's eyes widened with immediate understanding. "Is she going to die like Mommy?" The direct question broke. His heart. "No, honey. She's getting medicine that will help her feel better. You promise?" Her voice trembled. "I promise to tell you the truth, always," he answered carefully. "The doctors are doing everything they can." Lily nodded, then surprised him by climbing onto the couch beside him. "Can you stay right here until morning?" "I'm not going anywhere," he assured her. By dawn, Lily had fallen back asleep against his shoulder. Jonathan made calls, rescheduling meetings and arranging for Margaret's doctors to report directly to him. When Lily woke, he made pancakes, his first cooking attempt in decades, managing only slightly burnt results. "We should bring Grandma her favorite book," Lily decided over breakfast. "It helps her feel better." They packed a small hospital bag together, Margaret's reading glasses, her hand lotion, the book Lily insisted would help. At the hospital, they found Margaret, pale, but awake. Her eyes lit up when Lily entered. "My sweet girl," she whispered, opening her arms while Lily showed Margaret the items they'd brought. Jonathan spoke with the doctors in the hallway. The prognosis was guarded. The cancer had responded to treatment, but Margaret's heart was showing strain from the medications. "She needs rest, minimal stress," the oncologist emphasized. "At least 2 weeks of recovery." When Jonathan returned to the room, Margaret beckoned him closer. "They want me to stay here a while," she said quietly. "Lily will stay with me." Jonathan finished. "I've prepared a room for her." Margaret's eyes reflected uncertainty. "This is happening faster than I expected," she admitted. "I wanted more time to prepare her, to explain." "I understand," Jonathan said, "but we can manage this together, one step at a time." Later that evening, after Margaret had fallen asleep, Jonathan took Lily to his penthouse. Her eyes widened as the elevator opened directly into his home. "This is where you live?" she asked, taking in the expansive space. "It is, and I have something to show you." He led her down the hallway, stopping at a door painted with stars. "This is for you, for visits, or whenever you need a place to stay." He opened the door to reveal the room he'd had designed just for her. Twilight blue walls, a constellation ceiling, bookshelves, and a window seat overlooking the park. Lily stood speechless in the doorway, then turned to him with tears in her eyes. "You made this for me? Really, just for me?" "Really, just for you," he confirmed, his own eyes misting. "Welcome home, Lily." 2 weeks stretched into 3 as Margaret's recovery progressed slowly. During this time, Lily settled into a routine at Jonathan's penthouse. Breakfast together before school, homework at his home office desk while he worked nearby, and bedtime stories beneath her glowing constellation ceiling. Jonathan had hired a kind, grandmotherly housekeeper named Mrs. Chen, who helped with cooking and childcare when meetings couldn't be rescheduled. But he prioritized being present, rearranging his entire career around school pickups and dinner times. Today was special. Margaret was finally coming home, and they had made a decision together. During his hospital visits, it was time for Lily to know the truth. "Is Grandma's room ready?" Lily asked, arranging fresh flowers in a vase with painstaking care. They had prepared the guest suite for Margaret's continued recovery at the penthouse. Perfect, Jonathan assured her. She'll love what you've done with the flowers. When Margaret arrived, moving slowly with a walker, Lily rushed to embrace her, gently mindful of her grandmother's fragility. We've missed you, Lily declared. I've been taking care of Mr. Reed. He doesn't know how to sort laundry properly. Jonathan laughed. It's true, Jonathan said. Your scientific organization skills have been essential. After settling Margaret comfortably in the living room, Jonathan nodded slightly in her direction. She returned the gesture. It was time. Lily, Jonathan began, sitting beside her on the sofa. There's something important we need to talk about. Lily looked between them, suddenly serious. Is Grandma sick again? No, sweetheart, Margaret assured her. This is about something else, something about you and Mr. Reed. Jonathan took a deep breath. Lily, do you remember the photograph you showed me the day we first met when you were selling cookies? Lily nodded. Mommy's picture with my daddy. The man in the picture, Jonathan said gently, is me. Silence filled the room as Lily's eyes widened, darting between his face and the memory of the photograph. You're my daddy? She finally whispered. Yes, Jonathan's voice caught. I am. But you never came before. Mommy said Daddy lived far away. Margaret leaned forward. He didn't know about you, Lily. Your mommy tried to tell him, but the messages got lost. When I found you that day with your cookies, Jonathan continued, I realized who you were. I've been trying since then to be the father you deserve. Lily's brow furrowed as she processed this revelation. Is that why you made me a room and helped with my homework? Yes, Jonathan replied, because I love you very much. But you didn't know me before, Lily said, her voice small. I didn't, Jonathan admitted. And I'm so sorry for all the time I missed. If I had known about you, Lily, I would have been there from the very beginning. Lily considered this with the serious contemplation only a 6-year-old could manage. Grandma, did you know he was my daddy? Yes, sweetheart, Margaret replied. Your mother told me. Were you mad at him? Margaret smiled gently. For a while, but then I saw how much he cares about you. Lily turned back to Jonathan, her expression unreadable. Then, with the directness of childhood, she asked the question that mattered most to her. If you're my daddy, can I call you Dad now instead of Mr. Reed? Jonathan felt tears spring to his eyes. Nothing would make me happier. Lily nodded decisively, then climbed onto his lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. I always wanted a dad, she whispered against his shoulder. Outside the window, snow began to fall over Manhattan, covering the city in a blanket of white possibility. Inside, a family, unconventional and newly formed, had just taken its first real step toward healing. February brought warmer days and new rhythms to the Reed household. The transition hadn't been entirely smooth. Lily had moments of confusion and occasional tears for her mother, but she had embraced Jonathan as her father with remarkable openness. Margaret continued to recover, her presence providing stability. During this period of change, for Jonathan, fatherhood transformed his entire existence. Board meetings were scheduled around school events. Business trips were shortened or delegated. His phone now contained more pictures of science projects and ballet poses than stock charts. Daddy, look, Lily called from the breakfast table where she was completing a math worksheet. I figured out the pattern. Jonathan smiled at the still new term of endearment. Excellent work, Professor. You're a natural with patterns like you, Margaret observed from her seat by the window where she was regaining strength daily. Caroline always said you could see connections others missed. The mention of Caroline brought a familiar ache. Jonathan often wondered what she would think of their co-parenting arrangement, of his belated entry into Lily's life. His phone buzzed. Harrison again. His uncle had been surprisingly quiet since Jonathan's reorganization of the company, but lately he had been insisting on a private meeting. We should discuss the Singapore expansion, Harrison's text read. And other family matters. Dinner tonight? Jonathan hesitated. Harrison was still legally his business partner, and despite everything, the only family he'd known before Lily. He needed to address the intercepted letters to understand why Harrison had kept him from his daughter. "I'll be there," he texted. Back that afternoon, after dropping Lily at her ballet lesson, Jonathan visited his lawyers to finalize adoption paperwork. Though Lily was biologically his, she had no legal connection to him, a situation he intended to remedy. "Everything appears, in order," the attorney confirmed. "With Ms. Anderson's support and the DNA confirmation, this should proceed smoothly." Jonathan felt a weight lift. Soon, Lily would legally be a Reed. He picked her up from ballet, delighting in her enthusiastic demonstration of new steps in the car. At home, Margaret noticed Lily seemed unusually tired during dinner. "Are you feeling all right, sweetheart?" she asked as Lily pushed her food around. "My tummy feels funny," Lily admitted. "And I'm really sleepy." Jonathan felt her forehead. "No fever. Maybe you're just tired from ballet." By bedtime, Lily seemed better after a warm bath, though still quieter than usual. After tucking her in, Jonathan prepared to meet Harrison. "You're sure you don't mind staying with her?" he asked Margaret. "Of course not," she assured him. "Mrs. Chen is here too. Go handle your business." Harrison had chosen an exclusive restaurant in Tribeca, the kind that catered to power brokers requiring privacy. He stood as Jonathan approached the table, looking every bit the patriarch he considered himself to be. "You look well," Harrison observed. "Parenthood agrees with you." "It does," Jonathan replied simply, taking his seat. They ordered drinks, exchanging surface-level pleasantries about business matters. Finally, Harrison placed a folder on the table. "I've been reviewing our corporate structure," he said. "These reorganizations you've implemented, they make sense. I was wrong to resist them." Jonathan raised an eyebrow, surprised by the concession. "You've built redundancies, strengthened the executive team," Harrison continued. "The company doesn't suffer when you take time for personal matters. I'm glad you see that now." Harrison swirled his bourbon thoughtfully. "Family is complicated, Jonathan. Sometimes protecting someone means making difficult decisions for them, like intercepting Caroline's letters." Jonathan kept his voice level, despite the anger still simmering beneath. "You had no right." "Perhaps not," Harrison interrupted. "But consider where you'd be if I hadn't. A struggling young father, career derailed, resentful of responsibilities you weren't ready for." Before Jonathan could respond, his phone rang. Margaret's number, he answered immediately. "Jonathan." Her voice was tight with worry. "Lily's very ill. High fever, vomiting. It came on suddenly." "I'm on my way," he said, already standing. Harrison rose too. "The child is sick?" "Lily," Jonathan corrected automatically, throwing cash on the table. "And yes, she's ill." Something in Harrison's expression, a flicker of calculation quickly masked by concern, triggered a suspicion in Jonathan's mind. He'd seen that look before when deals were being manipulated. "You know," Jonathan said slowly, "this is the second time Lily's been unexpectedly ill. The first was after you visited the penthouse last week to drop off documents." Harrison's face remained impassive. "Surely you're not suggesting—" "I don't know what I'm suggesting," Jonathan cut him off, "but I intend to find out." At home, Jonathan found Lily feverish and miserable, Margaret applying cool compresses to her forehead. Within hours, they were in the emergency room where doctors ordered blood work and started IV fluids. "Has she ingested anything unusual?" the physician asked. "New medications, household products?" "Nothing," Jonathan insisted. "We're very careful." But as the doctor listed potential causes, Jonathan's suspicion crystallized into a terrible possibility. Taking out his phone, he made a call to his head of security. "I need the penthouse swept," he instructed quietly. "Every food item, every drink, and I need the security footage from the past week. All of it by morning." Lily's condition improved and the results were back. Traces of a prescription medication in her system, one typically used for anxiety but known to cause severe reactions in children. The same medication Harrison took daily. The security footage confirmed Jonathan's worst fears. During his brief visit, Harrison had lingered in the kitchen, slipping something into the container of hot chocolate mix that Lily loved. His uncle, his mentor, the man who had raised him, had deliberately poisoned his daughter. Jonathan stood at his office window, watching rain wash over Manhattan. The past 48 hours had been a nightmare. Lily's emergency room visit, the discovery of medication in her system, and the damning security footage that revealed Harrison's unthinkable betrayal. Lily was home now, recovered, and happily working on art projects with Margaret, unaware of the darkness swirling around her. Jonathan had increased security, replacing all food in the penthouse and adding personnel to monitor every entrance. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Reed, your uncle is here." "Send him in," Jonathan replied, not turning from the window. The door opened and Harrison entered with his characteristic confidence. "Jonathan, you've been avoiding my calls." "I've been busy." Jonathan finally turned, studying the man who'd raised him, searching for signs of the monster who would poison a child. Harrison looked exactly as he always had, impeccably dressed, composed, authoritative. "Lily's feeling better, I presume?" Harrison inquired, settling uninvited into a chair. "Much better," Jonathan replied. The doctors were baffled by her sudden illness. Jonathan moved to his desk, pressing a button that locked his office door. "Until we found traces of benzodiazepine in her system." "Your medication, Harrison." For a fraction of a second, Harrison's composure slipped, but he recovered quickly. "How unfortunate. Children get into everything." "Perhaps we have footage," Jonathan interrupted coldly. "Of you putting something in her hot chocolate mix. The same mix she had before becoming ill." Silence stretched between them like a chasm. Harrison's expression hardened, calculation replacing pretense. "You've lost perspective," he said finally. "This domestic experiment was amusing initially, but it's compromising everything we've built. You poisoned my daughter," Harrison waved dismissively. "A calculated dose, enough to cause symptoms that might suggest instability in the home. Nothing permanent." Jonathan felt bile rise in his throat. "Why the adoption papers?" Harrison replied matter-of-factly. "You're making her a legal heir to the Reed fortune, my fortune which I spent decades building while raising you." "So this was about money?" Jonathan's voice rose. "You nearly killed a child for money?" "Don't be dramatic," Harrison corrected. "It was about control, about bringing you back to reality. This paternal fantasy was fine as a diversion, but making her a Reed changes everything." "It changes nothing about your situation." Harrison laughed coldly. "Doesn't it? The board already whispers about your divided focus. Now you're installing a child, an outsider, as heir to an empire she had no part in building. What happens to my legacy?" "Your legacy?" Jonathan repeated, disgust evident. Was stealing a child from her father part of that legacy? Intercepting Caroline's letters? Keeping me from my daughter for 6 years? "I did what was necessary," Harrison insisted. "That woman would have ruined everything. You weren't ready. That wasn't your decision to make. Everything in your life has been my decision." Harrison stood suddenly, his composure fracturing. "I found you investment opportunities, introduced you to the right people, cleared obstacles from your path. I made you who you are." "No," Jonathan said quietly. "You made me who you wanted me to be. Someone like you. Alone, obsessed with power, incapable of love." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "Sentiment makes you weak. Always has." "You're wrong," Jonathan replied. "Lily makes me stronger. She reminds me why any of this matters." Jonathan unlocked his desk drawer and removed a folder. "These are the new corporate documents. I've dissolved our partnership. Your shares remain intact, but you're removed from operations and the board effective." Immediately, Harrison's face flushed with anger. "You can't do this. I built this company." "You poisoned a child," Jonathan replied evenly. "I have footage, medical reports, and witnesses. Sign these papers or I'll take everything else, including your freedom." "You wouldn't dare." "File charges. The scandal would devastate Reed Investments." "Try me," Jonathan's voice was still. "Family means everything to me now, Harrison, but you're no longer my family." The older man stared at the documents, decades of manipulation crumbling before him. With a trembling hand, he finally signed. "You'll regret this," Harrison said, rising to leave. "When the novelty wears off, when the sacrifices pile up, when you realize what you've thrown away for a child who isn't even, she is mine." Jonathan cut him off. "In every way that matters, something you'll never understand." As Harrison reached for the door, he turned with a final venomous smile. "We'll see how fatherhood suits you when the child learns the truth, that her father abandoned her, that her mother left them to struggle while he built an empire. She already knows." "The truth," Jonathan replied. "All of it, and she's forgiven me. That's what real family does." After Harrison left, Jonathan sat heavily in his chair, the weight of decades lifting from his shoulders. He'd confronted his past and chosen his future, a future with Lily at its center. Whatever challenges came next, they would face them. Together, spring arrived in New York City, bringing renewal to both the landscape and the lives of the Reed family. Cherry blossoms dotted Central Park in delicate pink clouds, visible from the windows of the brownstone Jonathan had purchased in the Upper West Side, a home more suited to raising a child than his minimalist penthouse had been. In the 3 months since Harrison's final departure from their lives, much had changed. The adoption was finalized, making Lily officially Lily Anderson Reed. Margaret's health had stabilized enough that she could enjoy her role as grandmother without the constant shadow of illness. And Jonathan had discovered a balance between business and family that had once seemed impossible. Today was special. Exactly 1 year since that fateful afternoon when a little girl selling cookies had changed his life forever. "Daddy, the flowers are perfect," Lily called from the garden where she was arranging white lilies in a simple vase. She wore a sundress the color of her namesake flower, her auburn hair caught in the gentle breeze. Jonathan watched her from the kitchen doorway, still sometimes overwhelmed by the miracle of her existence. "They're beautiful, Professor. Your mom would love them." They had established this tradition together, visiting Caroline's grave on significant dates, bringing fresh flowers and stories of their lives together. Today would be the first visit since Harrison's betrayal had been revealed and purged from their lives. Margaret joined them in the garden, moving more steadily now, with just a cane for support. "She's so much like Caroline," she observed, quietly. "The way she arranges things just so, the little crease between her eyebrows when she concentrates. But she has your determination," Jonathan replied with a smile. "And apparently, my head for numbers." Lily had indeed inherited qualities from both parents. Caroline's creativity and compassion blended with Jonathan's analytical mind and quiet intensity. But she was uniquely herself, a bright spirit who had somehow emerged whole and loving, despite the fractured beginning of her story. The Reed Investments Board had initially been skeptical of Jonathan's dramatic reorganization, but the company's performance under the new structure had silenced critics. Harrison had retreated to his estate in Connecticut, his influence diminished, but his financial standing intact. The compromise Jonathan had made to protect Lily from a public scandal had worked. When they arrived at the cemetery, Lily led the way confidently through the paths, carrying a drawing to leave at her mother's grave. A carefully rendered family portrait showing Margaret, Jonathan, herself, and a smiling figure watching over them from a cloud. "I made this for you, Mommy," she said, placing the drawing beneath the vase of lilies. "It's all of us together." Jonathan knelt beside his daughter, emotion tightening his throat. On the stone, Caroline's name caught the sunlight. Caroline, Elizabeth Anderson, beloved mother, daughter, teacher. "Your mom would be so proud of you," he said softly. "You know that, right?" Lily nodded, her small face solemn. "Grandma says she watches over us. Do you think that's true?" "I do," Jonathan said, surprising himself with his certainty. "I think she brought us together, even though you and Mommy couldn't be together when I was born." This was a question they'd discussed often during quiet moments, how sometimes love stories didn't follow simple paths, how adults made mistakes, How timing and circumstance could separate even people who cared deeply for each other. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, Jonathan explained, but true connections find their way back to each other. Your mom made sure I would find you, even after she was gone. Lily considered this, then turned to face her father fully. I'm glad you found me, even if it took a really long time. So am I, Professor. More than you'll ever know. They stayed by Caroline's grave for nearly an hour, Lily sharing stories about school, Jonathan adding memories of Caroline from their brief time together. Margaret occasionally wiped away tears, but they were no longer tears of bitterness or loss. Rather, they acknowledged the beauty of this unlikely family that had formed from fragments. As they prepared to leave, Lily suddenly wrapped her arms around the headstone in a gentle hug. Thank you for my daddy, she whispered to her mother's memory. I'm taking good care of him just like you asked me to. Jonathan blinked back tears. Caroline's last letter had indeed asked Lily to take care of him if they ever found each other. A final act of forgiveness and hope from a woman who had every reason to resent him. I have news, Margaret said as they walked back to the car. The doctor says I'm officially in remission. Jonathan embraced her, genuine relief flooding through him. That's wonderful. Does that mean you're all better? Lily asked, her face brightening. It means the medicine worked, Margaret explained. I'll need to be careful, but yes, much better. In the car, Lily fell asleep against her grandmother's shoulder, peaceful after the emotional visit. Jonathan drove carefully through the city streets, occasionally catching Margaret's eye in the rearview mirror. You've come a long way, she observed quietly. From the man Caroline described to me years ago? I hope so, Jonathan replied. I'm trying to be worthy of them both, Margaret nodded thoughtfully. Caroline would approve of the father you've become. Different from what either of you imagined, perhaps, but right all the same. As they arrived home, Jonathan carried the sleeping Lily inside. Her room, designed with constellations like the penthouse version, but warmer, with window, seats and bookshelves built to grow with her, was the heart of their new home. He tucked her in gently, brushing a strand of hair from her peaceful face. On her bedside table sat 3 treasures: the photograph of Jonathan and Caroline that had revealed their connection, the star charm bracelet he'd given her for Christmas, and a small worn book of poetry that had been Caroline's favorite. Past, present, and future, all contained in this small sanctuary created for a child who had unintentionally saved him from a life of hollow success. Sleep well, my star, he whispered, using the nickname that had evolved naturally between them. Outside. Lily's room. Jonathan paused in the hallway, taking in the transformation of his life. The walls that had once displayed expensive art now held Lily's drawings, family photographs, and height markers tracking her growth. The sounds of the home, Margaret humming in the kitchen, the distant ticking of the grandfather clock they'd found at an antique store during a weekend adventure, created a symphony more valuable than any business acquisition. He had spent decades building a fortune only to discover that his greatest treasure had been waiting on a sidewalk with homemade cookies and her mother's forgiveness in her pocket. Thank you, Caroline, he whispered to the woman who had loved him enough to leave the door open for him to find his way home, even if that journey had taken 10 years and a chance encounter to complete. Some fortunes, Jonathan Reed had learned, could never be measured in dollars.